dispatch that we send out. We do have an agenda, and I would like to call people's attention, please, to the bottom of the screen. You will see the word chat. Take the mouse down to the bottom of the screen. And what we're asking is that people type in, that they want to get on the stack. And then we can have some sort of organized methodology of calling on people, unless that your name is unless you have a visual impairment, as some people do. So some people are unable to see, they're unable to type, so they'll wave their hand, or they're unable to see the chat on their screen. So we can still call on people in that kind of manner. So Darnell did ask for a brief introduction because he's here in Detroit. And we'll go ahead, Darnell, take a couple seconds and let us know what's happening.
Jim B, Hetty is first up.
And Bish, can't hear you.
I said Hetty is first up. Watch that stack thing.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Good. Bish, we couldn't hear you.
I said, watch the chat thing because Hetty was number one.
Michael, you're Cherry.
All right, go ahead, Darnell. Take a couple seconds and tell us what's going on.
Yeah, Michael, please, Cherry, whoever you want.
Hang on, Hetty, wait. Go ahead.
Darnell,
Hetty,
me.
go ahead. Hetty's
Oh,
first.
Hetty.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Hetty,
good.
first. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just want to make a statement that I think all of us are veteran activists and that we are all doing what we can with our capacity and with the decisions we make. So I just don't want any presumption that none of us are doing, what some others feel that they should do. I think we're all doing what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
With that, I will give the mic over.
Okay, then, okay, thank you, Hetty. I got A, then Darnell. Go ahead.
Oh, I'll let Darnell go first because he.
Okay, go ahead, Darnell.
I'll go after Darnell. Go ahead, let him.
Well, okay. In 1968, almost 52 years to the day, I was arrested in Chulai, Vietnam, and brought back to the States, extradited from Vietnam and brought back to the States in handcuffs, and ultimately had to face a proposed murder charge for the murder of a Michigan State policeman who was a member of the Red Squad, which was a throwback to the McCarthy era. And they were tasked with, along with other agencies, to monitor left-wing activity, the Communist Party, various left-wing groups, individuals, and so forth, and individuals. Ultimately, the charge was dropped in 1969. And then again in 1982, I was arrested in Germany on the same charges. Just to make a long story short, the charges were dropped, and they were dropped primarily because the state did not want to give any more discovery. In other words, documents that they were using against me were too sensitive for them to allow to be published or to be handed over to the defense. And so they dropped the cat. Plus, I mean, I was innocent anyway, but at that point, just imagine they've tried once and then twice. They've extradited me from 2 different continents, and they decide that they don't really want to follow their own rules. And because they were in Detroit and the prospect of a convention was slim and none, they decided to back off. Now, I heard a few weeks ago from my brother that the Michigan State Police had paid him a visit in New Orleans, and they were not accompanied by any Louisiana state officials, whatever. So I'm assuming that the Louisiana authorities knew something about it, if not other agencies. But nonetheless, I talked with them about it. I was alerted to it. Then I did some further investigation and found that they had been talking to other people 3 weeks before that, just to get to the point. And because it involves a lot of different things. I had heard some discussion over the internet about sedition. And I thought that was very strange, just this talk about sedition, because in 1968, they had drawn up prospective charges against me, which included sedition. And if you go back to the Haymarket massacre and all the people that were involved in that, they threw the book at them with sedition and syndicalism and whatever. And these charges were reflected in the proposed charges that they wanted to levy against me. So when I get to the airport here in Detroit, they pulled me off to the side. My son was with me, and they told me they wanted to talk to me. I had assumed that I was being detained because they did not allow my son in the room. When we get back to the back in this room, they start asking me questions about Iran, about Kurdistan. I'm involved in many different things, and you should check them out for your own information. But there was a broad spectrum of questioning going on, and it was just blanket intimidation, and threatening. But anyway, in the end, they released me, and I left the airport, and I came to stay with a friend of mine in the Detroit area. And a friend of mine came to visit, and about, I don't know, 15 minutes after we sat down, my friend told me that the police were outside at his fence, and they wanted to talk to me. All right. So I've been under constant intimidation about this murder case. And a friend had commented, it's been 52 years that I've been looking over my shoulder with this murder case. And the question of sedition, that's been bandied around, this term, it's a real question that they're brushing off, in my estimation. They're brushing off all these old cases and looking at people who, quote unquote, got away, or people that they perceive to be guilty, or people that they seem to think are a threat to the national security of the United States. And they're brushing off all these cases. So right now, just to alert everybody that I'm under this threat. I am the only suspect, living suspect, and it's clear that they are making moves to bring back this murder case, this bogus ass murder case. And what's interesting is that in this election, people are not talking about, really, these candidates don't talk about the justice system really in any real sense. They don't talk about the 2.5 million prisoners that are in prison now and how to deal with that situation. They ignore that. They disregard that question. And that to me just kind of like displays the bankrupt nature, first and foremost, of the system, but of this present presidential election, and the people on both sides who don't really deal with the issues at hand. And there's a real
that pretty much moves us into the discussion that we're going to have, Darnell.
Right. So
Okay.
I just wanted to say that it's not just for me, not just for me, but it's a whole question of how they're going to deal with people who dissent and people who are, not lining up their shit.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, we got Renee and then Mark. Thank you. And then we'll get into the agenda. Go ahead, Renee.
Yeah, just a couple words about the calendar that's coming up that we should be aware of on the national scale. If you're thinking about, if we're thinking about some kind of united front or national front on national scale, and today is the 17th, 18th?
Yes.
So on October 22nd is National Day of Protest. On October 24th, Refuse Fascism are doing actions all over the country. And October 27th, the Frontline is also calling for national demonstrations. That's all over the country that's going on. Many of us have been training for being poll watchers, most of us outside the lines, so that people are not intimidated by the right wing. We expect the right wing to show up and intimidate people at the voting booths. And so everybody suddenly is jumping on the bandwagon in terms of training their own people. But I think they're using the same type of template, which is, the ACLU, guidelines. And I've called my county here in Southfield, West Bloomfield area, and the clerk is on top of it. The police chief is on top of it in terms of, the laws about long guns and stuff like that. Michigan just passed a law, no long guns allowed around the voting area. And it's just something that we should be aware of. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that update. Okay, I got Mark.
Hi. Yeah, I guess I wanted to say some of the same things that Renee just said, but to amplify that, I think it's a real question of like this. Maybe part of this discussion could be like, what's the difference between acting within the next 2 weeks before the election and, acting the day of or after the election? I think there's a crying need to have some kind of national display of, like they used to say in the Spanish Civil War, no pasaran. The fascists will not get by. You have to put them on notice and voting until they see what the results are, or to act. And I think we're definitely going to have to act after the election. It's going to be a whole new ball game in terms of what the political situation is. But I think there needs to be some kind of national, display of defiance, around whatever you want to call it, fascist, authoritarian, dictatorial agenda by Trump. And there are those 3 dates that Renee mentioned coming up, but we could pick any one of them and decide to throw in on some kind of, and unite others around that. That's basically what I think.
All right, we got Jim B on the stack.
I'm sorry? Oh.
Jim B, I'm sorry. Were you done, Mark?
Yeah, go ahead.
Responding to Mark, which I basically agree with, it's a continuum starting right now, all the way through and after the election. So those of us who are aware, and I think everybody on this call is aware, we need to have our act together in terms of collective activity starting right now.
Okay, I didn't know we have, let's get off into the agenda that we have set up, okay, because we have a number of points that we wanted to discuss. So from the weekly dispatch, these are the items that we wanted to touch on. First off, what is the propaganda that the bourgeoisie is using? The second point, how is Trump using propaganda both internally and externally? And then third point, how are we countering this with revolutionary propaganda? So let's get off, open up the discussion with what is the propaganda that the bourgeoisie is using? And I can add some points, okay? The number one point I want to add is QAnon, okay? So I know people are aware of what QAnon is. QAnon is a product of the Flat Earth Society. QAnon is a product of science does not exist except what comes out of Trump's mouth. So QAnon was something that was formed up and fostered solely by social media. And I opened it up for further discussion.
Right. Can you see my hand?
Okay, I got Wiley's hand is up. We'll call on Wiley. Go ahead, Wiley.
Yeah, very good point for discussion. I guess everybody's familiar with this whole gambit and propaganda campaign around this herd immunity and putting forth these bogus pseudoscientists about the effectiveness of herd immunity as a solution to the virus. And that's straight from the COVID task force of the Trump administration. Lee and I heard a very, very good counter to that argument on the Meet the Press of today from Dr. Uston. It's well worth looking at the Meet the Press of today to really get a sense of the kind of propaganda that's emanating out there from the Trump age I was on, but also, and more importantly, the response by the scientific community to that. And I think this herd immunity thing, some of the inhumane proposals that are coming forth on that, it's amazing. It's a throwback to some of the stuff that we heard from that Lieutenant Governor for Texas early. We talk about sacrificing old folks to keep the economy going. I think this discussion is very important.
Very good point. Okay, I got Daniel.
Yeah, I think as Wiley just alluded to, herd immunity is definitely a big talking point in terms of propaganda, and also how the concept of herd immunity crosses with or crossbreeds with eugenics and the resurgence of white supremacy at this time. And as we know, the virus is disproportionately affecting Black and brown and poor people. And it has been already argued that when the statistics started to come out that more poor and Black and brown people were dying, that's when the regulations were lifted and things kind of relaxed, because people saw it, as, oh, it's just poor and Black and brown people that are dying. Not healthy people or people without comorbidities and so on and so forth. So herd immunity is not also being offered as this like pseudo-scientific like solution. It's also being combined with some of those kind of white supremacist ideologies that are already existing within the state already.
Very good point, Daniel. I wanted to bring up a point that we have here. On the second page of our update, the weekly dispatch, there's here's why Trump has lost so much support in the active military. The next point down is moving right on Daniel's point. Trump's Minnesota visit had him acting like a Proud Boy. What Trump did in Minnesota was talk about last week we discussed the 21 points of Trump is a clear fascist, walking clearly in Adolf Hitler's boots. And what the fascists did in Germany to popularize the idea was the race horse breeding. Okay, so this is what Trump talked about in Minnesota to this crowd, that we breed racehorses, and so we breed humanity. Okay, which has absolutely nothing to do with science at all. It's pure fascist propaganda. Pure fascist propaganda. And this is what he was talking about in Minnesota to this crowd. So
What'd you do like that?
okay, Hetty's saying we got background voices, so people need to mute. Okay, people need to mute. All right, thank you, Hetty. All right.
No, I didn't want to say anything. I just couldn't hear you properly.
Okay, thank you, Hetty. All right, Darnell, you're on stack. Go ahead.
John.
You gotta unmute, Darnell.
We're talking about this fascism in a very broad sense. And, as we approach the election, and I think one good example of what's going on is this latest plot that was uncovered to kidnap the governor. I don't know how much of that we can, like digest, but the overriding question is, what can we expect the situation to look like? How will these things unfold as we approach the election? I mean, we're just weeks away from it, and we're still talking in these general terms. That's not to say that you have to deal in all the specifics of that, but people have to, at some point, and I'm not just talking about this group, but generally speaking, they have to understand, how will this unfold? These now provisions that people can't show up with guns at the polling stations. And then there's also this question, can they enforce it? I mean, that's a real question, So I'm just kind of confused about people concentrating on really getting the message out there about how this will manifest itself in real terms.
Oh, wow.
Very good point. Okay, Wiley?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I want to respond to the point that Darnell just made.
Oh, you got to unmute, Wiley. Go ahead.
Okay,
You're muted. Go ahead,
you can
Wiley.
hear me? Okay, I can't see a damn thing. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I said, I want to follow up on Danielle's point from a little different tack. I think there is a lot of specific information out there, and it's being raised in the bourgeois media itself. This stuff is so transparent and dangerous that you can't help but talk about it. And I want to refer people again to today's Meet the Press, where the governor from Michigan was on, and listen to her presentation. I mean, there is genuine concern within the bourgeoisie itself that this motion is even beyond their control, in terms of this whole propaganda that is promoting violence and nihilism of a sort. It is flooding the airwaves. And along with that is a message of uncertainty, like geez, we don't know what to do. We don't know how we're going to control the other message that's coming out of is that it's a situation that is literally spinning out of control. So, and I'm not saying this to disagree with Darnell. I do think we have to have a very specific discussion, but I think we have to really look at this thing in a very comprehensive fashion, because it can also be an expression of the fact that given the crisis of capitalism, that matters are spun out of control to the point that even the capitalists themselves are having difficulty in assuring that things don't spin in a way that it adversely affects the whole society, including themselves. And it seems to me that the pandemic itself poses this kind of possibility. So this question of propaganda, not only, as Mike put it, not only what we hear from the bourgeoisie, but what must be our propaganda, that is propaganda of revolutionaries in response to this thing. And I think a big element that we have to address is installing and restoring confidence in the people that the capability of solving these problems is within them, is within the class, and so forth. And through our propaganda, take that message and a vision of confidence that no matter what happens, we can take care of it, the people themselves.
Okay, I got Jim B. No, I got Renee, and then we got Jim B. You're on mute, Renee. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with what Wiley just said. It's very good. I want to go back just a little bit to what Michael was saying, and just a little review in terms of the herd mentality and relation to fascism in Nazi Germany, remembering that it also raises some questions for us, I think. remembering that how much Hitler was influenced by United States policy towards towards the Black community, Jim Crow, etc. Hitler was very impressed by the way that was being done. At the same time, the eugenics question comes in, which really started in the United States in the medical profession and spread out throughout the world. And the whole idea of social Darwinism and survival of the fittest, Hitler liked that very much, and he wanted to clean up the pool, the blood pool in Germany, make it pure by getting rid of Jews and gypsies and et cetera. And the herd immunity concept in the United States sounds to me, and I agree with what was just said, well, the poor people and people of color are dying, so that's okay, right? I mean, unconsciously or consciously, that's what a lot of the rulers are thinking here. And then that's, to me, that's always led to kind of an uncomfortable question about Planned Parenthood and family planning. And some of that in the old days was considered the people had good intentions in terms of family planning, the early leaders in the United States, but it was interpreted in the Black community as another, and I think it still is, as a form of genocide. And so it leads into the question of women's rights and abortion today, Planned Parenthood, how is it viewed, etc. So there's all these connections, and I'm not too clear exactly how they're handled, but I know they're very sensitive issues. But there's a connection. I mean, Hitler learned a lot from the United States, and there's still, I think, the herd immunity concept is kind of still part of that whole trend.
Jim B.
Just a very brief comment. We have, as Darnell pointed out, are kind of looking at the broad picture, which we absolutely have to do. But as it plays out in our experience, the application is local. When they say all politics is local, they're not lying. I mean, its application ain't just in general. It's very local. That was it.
All right, I want to call attention to something that Mark posted. One of them is organize, don't agonize. And the other one is something that Renee had set up, choose democracy. I also would encourage people to go to this last week's Democracy Now, which has an excellent piece on the proposed outcome of the election and how the probability is that it's going to be chaotic because the vote is not going to be known probably for an extended period of time, week. In fact, what is discussed regularly now is that the election from New York from June has still not been decided. So, it's a very, very unsettling situation here. There's absolutely no doubt about it, Okay, all right. Okay, Darnell yields to David. David, you're on stack.
Hi, this is me.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
On the question of herd immunity, Lerna takes the position that we're in a new epoch now because of the new mode of production using digital production. It's entirely different than electromechanical production and eliminates labor. So we see the prison population has increased from, 600,000 to 2.5 million. We don't seem to be able to go to war anymore because these other countries are able to defend themselves. So what's another way of getting rid of excess workers? that is herd immunity. So I just thought, and to use Jim Bish's language, culling the herd. And so I just wanted to throw that into the discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, at this point, we should try to move the agenda points here. Okay, so the next point we had on the agenda speaks to how is Trump using propaganda both internally and externally to create this level of chaos out here in the country. And you know, I welcome some points that people have concerning this whole point of Trump. I heard today there's going to be another debate. I guess he's agreed to another face-to-face debate. So the rallies that he has, he just puts out one fallacy after another fallacy after another fallacy after another fallacy, which are readily accepted by the bourgeois media, readily accepted. Okay, Wiley, go. You're on mute, Wiley. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
In the important point, and I think what I pose is, I think I'm going to go a little. No, this is on target. This is on target. My son Aaron made a hell of a point in the discussion. I was discussing an article that me and I had submitted to the group that he had read, and the point that he raised was this whole, what he called the fetishism of the individual, and it got me to thinking about the attitude and the psychology of Trump's base. There's and I'm just raising because it gives us, I think it gives a little insight into the dynamic here. For those of you who, some of us are old enough to remember Jonestown, that horrible situation when there's a mass suicide, and how the people were caught up in the cult of the individual and gave up their own brain and ability to think for themselves in a blind followership of Jim Jones, and it led to their death. And I think there's some very sinister and important parallels to the present situation, particularly as it relates to Trump and the psychology that goes on with these rallies. When you think about situations like, this fool will say something offhand like bleach will clean your system, and then people kill themselves by injecting bleach into their veins. Or that people will run around and deny basic science and refuse to wear a mask. You know, turn the whole question of mask into a political question, risk their lives and the lives of others blindly. And that is not just an individual marginal phenomenon, it's a mass phenomenon. Tens of thousands, like at these rallies and stuff that he's going to be holding, there are going to be thousands of people out there who will not wear a mask and so forth. And it's because of the fact of the idolatry of this individual, this crazy, buffoon. I mean, just to put it bluntly, and to even hear in mass media now that given the nonsense, the crazy stuff that's been out there the last couple of weeks with Trump, that the media they're even going to talk about the possibility of him winning. And the possibility of winning makes you think, who in the hell would vote for something like that, thinking person that is, given this, the kind of thing that people are going to 220,000, 10,000 people dead or more. Millions are out of work. And still we're talking about the possibility of the son of a bitch winning. And what that means, and it has to mean, it can mean, is that whatever we may think that his personage and his messaging influences a hell of a lot of people. And not only that, but even if he loses, he has a base and a following that will continue to be active and potent well after the election, and something that we're going to deal with now in the future. So I'm just, it just, after talking with Aaron this morning, it just hit me. I haven't even thought it through, but it's much of what it makes you think about all of those kind of sinister possibilities and probabilities that comes out of this thing.
Very good point, Wiley. Great, very good.
I'm on staff.
Okay, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, just a couple points. Trump was in Michigan yesterday, and we all know about the plot to kidnap Governor Whitmer and how he's been supporting these paramilitaries, which the U.S. government uses everywhere in the world, right? They use them in Colombia. They use them in Syria. So, but he had everybody chant. He started laying into Whitmer and have them chanting. The crowd started chanting, "Lock her up, lock her up." So that's just another point in terms of this chaos that he's creating. Secondly, in terms of, I forgot who said that the government doesn't even think it can control the situation. Well, I think one reason that it may not think it can control the situation is because it can't depend on the police. They had this rally at the Michigan State Capitol, and I saw Michigan State police officers embracing some of the armed demonstrators. It was right on the camera. And we know they've infiltrated the police department. We know how they're killing African-American citizens. And we know what Trump represents. So I think there may be a feeling among the powers that be in response to, I think what Wiley was saying, is that they cannot depend on the police to maintain law and order. Thank you.
All right, we got Renee, and then we got Daniel.
Yeah, just an observation about chaos. Chaos in any kind of, revolutionary situation or transfer of power or rebellion, we're going to get chaos. So I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing to be taken advantage of, and it shows that things are being shaken up. And it makes the bourgeoisie nervous. That's true. At the same time, when we think about the bourgeoisie, really doesn't care whether it's Trump or Biden in the end, as long as because they're not comfortable with the chaos. The only people not comfortable with the chaos are, the investors and those elements, finance, etc. So, I would look at it in a positive way. That chaos is, we should use that to our advantage.
All right, Daniel.
Yeah, I know Darnell was on stack as well. Darnell, you want to go first?
I yield to you. I'll come after you.
Okay. Well, in terms of what Darnell brought up in terms of like talking about like how this is actually going to play out and the way that it's playing out, I think we're seeing how it's what potentially post-election, I think we're seeing how it could potentially play out. We're already seeing it played out when we talk about this Ritter House, the young man that traveled from there on to play policemen and to shoot and murder people, likely because right-wing propaganda likely because of white supremacist propaganda. And you have a president that's calling on, not only do they have the police, which we talk about right-wing groups infiltrating the police, that they've also long infiltrated the military as well as white supremacist groups, as they do in the police right now as well. And now you have a president calling on civilians to also arm themselves, to ally themselves with the police, with the military, um, uh, uh, in terms of crushing the dissent from the revolts from the murder of George Floyd. Also, there was talks about the border patrol being used to surveil protesters, drones being used from the border protection um, agencies to surveil protesters, to gather up information. Um, I think what we're seeing now, and also we talk about the resurgence of white supremacy. There was a man earlier in September who was lynched in Iowa. Um, uh, he was found burning in a ditch, after, and it's being connected to a hate crime. So in terms of like how it's all going to play out, I think we're seeing how it could play. We're seeing it right now. And obviously the buck doesn't start with Biden, because as we know, Biden has his own history as an imperialist, having white supremacist ties. We could see a similar thing under a Biden administration. Obviously not the buffoonery, maybe not the hardline fascism, but we could see similar things. Do people stop being extrajudicially killed by the policeman because Joe Biden is president? I say no. Most would say no, given his policy record and his support behind the police. Joe Biden wants to give $300 million to the police. He doesn't want the police to be defunded. He doesn't want to reappropriate the funds of police funding. He wants to give the police more police. He wants to give them more money. He wants to give the military more money. It's evident in his policies of the past. So I think that needs to be a part of our vision as well.
All right, thank you. All right, I got Darnell, then I got Luke, then I call
No,
on
as I
myself.
said before, I was met by an assortment of police agents from the airport to my friend's house. I don't even know who they were, and if they're people who are allied with the right-wing agenda or not. I would assume that some of them are, because this effort against me and other people in the United States certainly indicates that. I just want to clarify one thing about how this thing will manifest itself. I was talking, essentially about the loose cannons and the lone guns, the people who are operating on their own. We know groups will be out there with and without arms, but there seems to be the if you will, the euphemism of the dog whistle, to set the dogs out. So what disturbs me the most, it's like being in a combat zone, when some fresh guys come in, they don't know what to expect. Just like this election, you're bringing the people into a combat zone, and a lot of these people have some illusions about democracy, illusions about the protection under the law, the illusions about the police, all these things that are being laid out here. And an effort must be made to some extent, where possible, to inform people, to educate them about the dangers that, that loom over us all, because we do have a responsibility to at some point, and at the same time, protect the unwitting, the people who are just operate under these illusions. I'm very worried about that.
All right, I got Jim B, and then Luke, and then myself.
You said Jim B?
I said Jim Bish, yep.
Okay. Just a point that Daniel made that he reference to about, you know, they need, the bourgeoisie needs the arming of civilians, i.e., I'm referencing the militias and all that. That has been something that's been going on for a very long time, where civilians, i.e. militias and other groups, can and have been getting heavy military equipment under the guise of military surplus for a very long time. I'm aware of it from all the way back in the 70s. So that's where the arms is coming from. That's it.
All right, Luke, and then myself. Luke, you're on. Luke, you're up.
Oh,
Okay, go.
I just scan read Wiley's analysis that I think he sent to most of you, and I think this so well studied, very insightful analysis. I think it's well worth our study. To get back to the point, we talk about a vision for the masses, as though we're kind of searching for a vision, but we have already identified two movements, very powerful movements, the Black Lives Matter movement and the visions that are expressed in that movement, and the Poor People's Campaign and the vision that is expressed there. And these are value-based visions. So it's not a point, but well, where we go, and we have seen how the masses react to these visions offered by these movements. Right? That's point number one. And point number two is that when Wiley was talking about basically some of the concerns of the whole of society, but especially the ruling elite, is the uncontrollables, right? What we know, and I think that these uncontrollables, or this chaos, is a concern of the whole society at different levels and different intensities. Because we know that any organization or society values stability. And Renee was talking about, well, chaos is an opportunity, and that chaos is a good thing. I think that should be conditional. When chaos and uncontrollables go, a lot of times the left loses and the right prevail. And it depends upon the whole configuration of the forces. So chaos, the chaotic disruption is necessary. If you want to change the status quo, you got to disrupt it. So it's a necessary condition, but you might not get where you want to go depending upon basically the reactions. And we've seen that about the Arab Spring and all of that, all these, these progressive forces got crushed, by the right wing during that chaos. So we got to be very careful. Yes, we got to, a disruption and chaos is necessary, but we got to, unless we have to see this alignment of forces, it can go in one direction or the other. The other point is this, and our study history is that, we tend to be, in our thinking, we tend to be materialistic based. In other words, we like to say how things can be explained by rationality, by concrete facts, and all the rest. And then when we see all of this kind of craziness with the Trumpites and all of that, how they reject science, they're anti-scientific, and they buy into myths, they buy into conspiracy theories and all of that. But we got to be mindful in terms of human history. The more powerful beliefs are what? They're not factual based. They're faith based. They have people walking on water, people immaculate conception, people dying and rising after 3 days, and all these faiths. And so that's usually a really powerful idea, powerful belief system is based on stuff around the supernatural, around stuff that doesn't make any kind of rational sense. So I think we got to get a better hold in terms of when we begin to talk about how some of those myths are politicizing people and how they're manipulated So we have to pay much more attention to the ideological aspect of what's shaping people's belief, because we say, well, hey, look at their economics. How could they go for it? Look at their health condition. What rational person would go for it? Hey, so I'm saying essentially we better examine more closely belief systems.
Yeah, I want to take off on what Luke, very good points, solid, very solid. And I want to bring up something that Dave Smolder talked about last weekend, last Sunday. Dave, at one of our meetings, purchased a book from the president of China. And we had some discussion about, what John fed in, John Williams also fed in, on belief systems. Okay. And some of the things that Dave was talking about is that what the Communist Party of China is doing is bringing forward these values and history of Chinese philosophy that goes back eons. And this is what is important to the people in China. They discuss these things and they value these things. And these things can be utilized for the furtherment of the socialist development of China, and attempting to rein in the private capitalists that have modernized the society, and many of them have taken a perspective that is contrary to the views of the Communist Party and of socialist China. So that's a point that needs to be understood here. I spend a lot of time online, and there's this guy, Jordan Klepper, who's on he's on the same channel that one of these news programs is on, that he goes to these Trump rallies, and these people, he interviews these people, and what Luke was saying, he says, he goes to these people, do you believe it? This goes to these women, do you believe in QAnon, that the Democratic Party is a satanic cult, they're pedophiles and drinking blood? And these people respond like, well, it might be, and exactly what Luke is saying, it's a complete abject elimination of any sort of rational thinking. But people accept this. And a point that was made here, by Mark, is that, Jonestown was, a cult following, and Trump is a fascist following. Trump is white power. Trump is the history of America. Trump is chattel. Okay. And, it's very clear here who he speaks to. Very clear, very clear. So that's my 2 cents on the situation, very different perspective from Jonestown to Trump town. Okay, Darnell, you got to go?
In a minute, I was on stack.
Okay, go ahead, Darnell.
Okay, on the question of, what was it? Chaos. I mean, in the cosmic sense, out of chaos comes order, so we can expect some chaos. Now, the way I'm not going to interpret what Renee was saying. He can do that for himself. Of course, we're living, the whole implementation of the policies of the United States government and its allies is chaotic, in and of itself. If anybody's chaotic, it's them, and they go from crisis to crisis in a chaotic way. They're the masters of that. But I'd have to say, that chaos, if implemented, in a certain sense, by a certain opposing force, against their enemies, is a good thing, if one can capitalize on it. In other words, if we can understand what that chaotic situation is and move against it to resolve it, that's a good thing, right? And that's so I'm sure, Luke, that you adhere to that also, you know. So I just wanted to clear that up. We there again, this is a chaotic situation, you know, by any definition, because of the different the confusion, just the fact that people are asking people to vote for the Democrats and their candidates, kind of like, indicates a certain chaotic situation, because no one in their right mind would like suggest that under quote unquote normal circumstances. There wasn't even any debate about opposing candidates. They did the et tu brute on the main man, Bernie Sanders. I got my son sitting up here right now, and he was going to vote for Bernie Sanders. He was so disappointed that he said, well, no, I'm not voting, and he kind of like saw through the whole thing, and we're there's so many things I could say about this whole situation here. We're coming down to the wire. I'm sure the people here who ran track, we all know everybody's jockeying for position. You're running out of steam, your ass is burning, and you're trying to get to the finish line, and you better be prepared. And our charges, the people that we're responsible for, some of them are looking to us and other people. Someone said it the other day, a friend of mine said, we're the old guard, and there's a place for us in all of this. Trust me. And we got to step up to the plate and be just as energetic as we were 50 years ago, and just as flexible.
All right, Mark.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to something Daniel said. He made the point about, post-election, there's going to be, and if Biden wins, it's not going to be the end of police murder and brutality and the oppression of Black people. And I want to link that to something I heard on a video of somebody speaking at the Detroit Will Breathe rally yesterday, where he made the point that, police are the domestic enforcers of state power. They're actually doing their job when they carry out these murders, for this system. But right now, democracy, as we've known it, is under attack by this Trump law and order assault. We can't, sort of mush that together. My comment on that is we can't mush that together equal schmequal, Trump fascism and quote unquote normal murder and carrying out of the the way this system works. It's going to get a lot worse. And I think that points again to our responsibility to try to fight for some kind of action before the election, because what's going to put people in a better position to fight what comes after, no matter what it is, we got to get organized now. We got to show that there's a force today that opposes all this stuff. We can't, some people have illusions about even what fascism is. Literally overnight in Germany, they smashed any dissident, any dissent. They were able to, it wasn't like, well, okay, we'll go out and protest after Trump gets reelected or steals the election. There's a real possibility that they could institute an all-out police state very quickly. The new Enabling Act in 1933 was put into effect in March. That was only 3 months after there was legally appointed chancellor, through the way that the processes of that system. The Enabling Act allowed Hitler to rule by decree. So I think if we got to put that into one of the possible scenarios as well and be prepared for that, which requires us to sound the alarm and, do something before the election. So again, I would go back to those 3 possible dates we could pick. If anyone wants to talk more about that, find a way to reach me, go to that Organize, Don't Agonize site or the, Choose Democracy site or anything else. I think everyone here is, there's a real powerful basis to unite the various forces in Detroit. Detroit Will Breathe, religious forces, political organizations that are against what Trump is up to and pull something off that will be a statement to the whole nation. Anyway, my 2 cents.
All right, we got Hetty, and then we got Wiley.
Just wanted to pick up on what you said, Michael. You were saying, I hope I got this right, there's an elimination of thinking amongst this herd. So it's an elimination of thinking for themselves. Where's that coming from? Are they just simply lazy? Or because they are controlled by capitalist values, it's much easier to go with that current instead of against it. And so you're going to get votes from this herd. And what I've been seeing is that one of the more critical disruptors of this herd mentality is the herd offspring, in particularly young white women who have begun to use the anti-racist language, anti-isms, to fight against their older generation. So I'm seeing that shift, and hopefully with that shift, you're going to see a long-term change. That's it.
Okay, thank you. So we've got, I got Dave, who was skipped. Then I got Wiley, and Jim Bish posted a chat that we have an enabling act right now. It's called the Patriot Act.
Right.
So, all right, so we got Dave, and then Renee. And
Yeah,
then Wiley. Dave, Renee, and Wiley.
with regard to these crazy ideas about drinking blood and stuff, in reality, we've got Maxine, whatever her last name was, and Epstein. Who would believe it? Trafficking in young women. You got presidents and who knows, the whole ruling class is Goes Island. People know that. People now can believe all these people they respected, you know, that were that they looked up to are trafficking in young women. So now that opens the door for them to believe anything, really. It came up during Hillary's election. People, oh, that's crap, that's bullshit. But then it came up and he was killed in prison. You know, like, how the hell could they get to the most, you know, the biggest prisoner in the country and just kill him, and the tapes are gone and the guys are asleep? Everybody knows that that's not true. So that opens the door for people to think all kinds of crazy stuff, because it is crazy. It's like Nero fiddled while Rome burned. The whole thing is corrupt, it's crazy, and everybody knows it, and they don't know what to believe. I wanted to say that. Plus, you know, this is a question of chaos. You can't just make general statements, in my opinion, chaos is good. You have to look at what the balance of forces are. Who's going to take advantage? They're the ones creating the chaos. So they have a plan. They got their armed guys, they got the Border Patrol, they got the ICE, they got the cops who are in the right-wing organization. They're all organized. Our position is, you know, at this juncture, we need to buy time. We know they're both crooks. We know they both represent the bourgeoisie, but we know one absolutely defends social fascism, and we need time to build our movement for the next 4 years. And there's lots of people who are saying the day after the election, we're on the streets making those demands on Biden. And when he doesn't respond, we organize some more. So I think we got to look at, as materialists, we got to look at what the real situation is and plan from there. And it ain't going to be us. You know, we can provide some direction, some knowledge as propagandists, but it ain't going to be us doing the organizing, I don't think. It's going to be the young people. We need to help to train them, to educate them, and get involved with what they're doing.
All right, we got Renee.
Yeah,
Wiley, you on stack, Wiley?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, Renee and then Wiley.
okay, just the point about chaos. If you want to, change the language and talk about that somehow, rebellion. There's been rebellion in the last few years. It's been recognized all around the world in terms of what's going on in the United States as just a national rebellion. And in response to that, there's been everything that we've talked about, the police, et cetera, and more chaos in response to the oppression of the people, especially people of color. So I'll leave that. But I wanted to follow through a little bit in terms of what Luke was saying and Mike was saying about the faith the faith in opposition to reason. So I always had this idea about the Enlightenment and that you could appeal to the masses with reason. And then, recently I found out through research and stuff like that that people really don't respond to reason. They respond to their feelings about situations. And there's been some interesting articles recently. Chris Hedges has been talking about that quite a bit, about the suicide. You think about these Trump people without the masks, or you can think about Jones, but doing self-injury, right? They know, the science tells them that you go without a mask, eventually you're going to infect everybody. They don't care. Is there a suicidal instinct? Well, according to Chris Hedges, talking about a researcher named Durkheim, who observed suicide in societies, and think about the suicide rate in our country today, it's pretty high. And there was individual suicides. There's also communal suicide. There's an instinct for communal suicide, which I think is what we observe when Trump is talking to these masses that are just sitting there without masks right next to each other. And they're not listening to reason. They're not listening to the science. It's based on their faith in whether it's the world after, or they don't care, or what Trump says. It's absolutely has nothing to do with reason or logic or science. I think we have to accept that's part of the audience out there.
Yeah.
All right, Wiley.
Yeah, Mike, my vision, by the way, my vision is coming back slowly, but I'm not there yet.
Okay.
A couple of points for perspective. And I'm trying to get it together so I can see it as quickly as possible. The first thing is we have had a very good discussion about the Trump and the crisis on the agenda. But we must not forget that they do not represent the vast majority of the public. That's the first thing. That the vast majority of the people are opposed to this and so forth, and do not support it and so forth, and do support science and reason. Keep in mind that the most optimistic figures in terms of Trump's base is 30%. The second observation is that this whole thing does not rise organically, objectively. It is a planned, subjective offensive, objective-based offensive by the bourgeoisie that's been in process for the last 50 years to miseducate the masses of people, to attack them in their institutions and so forth, beginning with Reagan, beginning with the Powell memo in 72 forward. This has been a conscious campaign on the part of the bourgeoisie over a half century to misinform, disrupt, disorganize, disorient the movement, this objective movement. And that's why I think over here we've always, that is learning, my experience is learning in other organizations that I've been involved with, great emphasis on the subjective factor, the need to educate, the need to inform. And why? Because capitalism has had a monopoly throughout the whole of the history of this country in terms of educating and forming a world vision, a world view. I mean, that's been their province all this time. And in spite of that, the objectively masses have progressively pushed against that. And we arrived at the point where we are on the point of imminent open rebellion as a result of this stuff in terms of disapproval by the masses of this thing. And the question is, as we said, and I'm saying this to remind ourselves, and we are clear on it, that's why we as propagandists put a premium on what? Education. You know, that is informing the masses and so forth, and that's a critical question. Finally, in terms of something Jim Bish said way back when in this thing, and I think I absolutely agree with him, that to fully understand where the masses are, we have to go local. Lee and I have been doing a lot of reading, and it's amazing the kind of activity on certain groups that is taking place across this country. I think we have to really, for example, I'll give one example. If one takes the time to inquire closely, look at the local level, look very practically, and to develop an answer to the question, what is sustaining this Black Lives Matter movement? What gives it its multiracial character? How is this happening? What explains Portland? What explains Seattle? What explains Minneapolis? We will find that what explains it is the active activity of the people at the local level. They're waging an incessant struggle against the very forces we're talking about. And I think that if we take the time to look at that, we'll see that the more we look at it, the more clearly that we will see that. So I think we got to keep in mind that history is on our side, the people are on our side. You know, we simply have to carry out the task that we know as propagandists that we have to do.
Okay, on that note, Al?
Yep.
Okay, Al.
Just, I mean, I've been watching, and it's getting greater. These retired generals, at least some of them, are coming out as Trump. And if Trump plans on, if what they're doing is trying to throw I don't know, a wrench in Trump's plans, if he loses the election, he can always, he's still a commander in chief till January sometime. He can always try to bring the military into this situation. You know, I think what you're seeing is some opposition to that from these retired generals, but you haven't heard anything from active duty officers or whoever. And I just want to keep, you know, I would suggest people keep an eye on that. This election's what, 3 weeks away? And it's going to take a while to count the votes. But I think that's the dangerous time we live in. Okay, is that if the bourgeoisie doesn't see any further use for the Democratic Party and Trump loses, you may see a military takeover. That's it. Thanks.
All right, we got Luke, and then I'm gonna call on myself. Go ahead, Luke.
Okay, I want to pull back and discuss some things in a broader framework. the broad framework is we discuss neoliberalism. In other words, how the private sector is encroaching and becoming more and more of the overall economic pie, and how the public sector is shrinking, and that looking at that whole dynamic. So that neoliberalism is the larger kind of frame that we can begin to talk about this Trumpism. And the other larger frame is a global frame. And one thing that's united, particularly against the ruling class, the ruling elite, is the language that they use in terms of the global world order. The U.S. is the predominant military and economic power, and that Democrat or Republican elite feel what they consider these losses. It is a loss in terms of the picking order, because China is making more and more advances, and for some of the reasons that Michael tried to get us to focus on, in terms of how the Communist Party in China, and how they work with this Chinese entrepreneur group, and how they're doing things in a much more smarter way. The Chinese elite are probably the most brilliant elite on the globe at this time, in terms of their understanding of what the global dynamics are, and how they're moving, and what their strengths are, and what they are, the weaknesses of their adversary, and how they're able to move collectively. And that's is a big threat to the capitalist elite, the Western elite. So both the Biden administration or the Trump administration, they may have different kind of strategies, but they want to remain at the top of the hill, and they see the biggest threat undermining that is Chinese strategy and how they're going about and all of that. All right. So this kind of instability at the global level, as they see it, and what they see the threat is, and the domestic issue as they operate. So I'm just saying, in terms of drawing back and look at these big frameworks in this the global move of and the forces against neoliberalism, and the attempt by the Western general, the U.S. in particular, particularly the Anglo-Saxon nations. I'm talking about England, I'm talking about Britain, I'm talking about the U.S., I'm talking about Canada, I'm talking about New Zealand, I'm talking about Australia, and that whole kind of Teutonic alliance, English-speaking Teutonic alliance.
All right, so we're running on to 3:30. I just want to try to summarize a little bit here. Okay, so first of all, on Al's point, the Democracy Now! YouTube from last week discussed this whole question of the post-election probability. And one of the things that they brought out, Al, is that if you look at what happened with the military when Trump went to the church, the military pretty much rejected Trump wholehandedly. Number two, what the Democracy Now! Talked about is that in these cities, in these swing cities, it's the swing states that are critical for Trump, that being Detroit and Chicago, I believe they have already installed these forces that are allied with Trump. The ICE people and these other militaristic groupings that are already in Detroit and they're already in Chicago. These are, and what they talked about in the Democracy Now! Program is the seizing of the ballot boxes, that this is the role that these forces will play if they feel that the election was skewed. So they already they have a plan in place, and it's not, the picture is not is pretty much if this is what they're talking about, the ability of the military to step in, I don't know. But the article that we came up with on the bourgeois propaganda, perhaps we could put that to the head of the agenda for our next meeting, which basically deals with the looming threat of a socialist America. What the article talks about quote unquote strength of the left, the Democratic Socialists, the Squad, the fact that they were able to take down candidates who had 10 times the funding that these people had, and how they had a wide base backing in the community, and how they were able to pull forces from other areas of the country to provide financing and stuff for these campaigns. They talk about what's going on in Texas and California, and the one of the quotes they have in the article: "For those who say it can't happen here, there are warning signs aplenty." And this is the commentary article that we talked about. Distinguished fellow in conservative thought, the looming threat of socialism in America. Okay, we got Wiley.
You're on mute. Can't hear him.
You're on mute, Wiley.
Leah's doing, okay?
Yeah.
Got it?
Yeah, got it.
Yeah. Leah and I, as Luke pointed, Leah and I submitted an article on that very question for discussion by the group as a contribution. I think it's a very important discussion. And we like to place that article in consideration.
Okay, for next week. No problem.
Huh?
The impact of the Bernie Sanders campaign, correct?
Yeah.
Wiley? Got it. Okay, we'll put that on the agenda for next Sunday.
Yeah. One other quick point on that is there is a I can't forget it. There is I'll post this to you, to Mike or John, a podcast that I've been listening to. I just can't think of the name. I want to get that to you. That
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'll give it to you. I just can't think of the name.
No
Right
problem.
now. I think it's along the same lines you talked about here, Mike. And my last thing is, again, I urge people to check out that Meet the Press discussion today. It's quite instructive. That's it. I'm out.
Okay. It's anybody else got anything? Because it's 3:30. We try to wrap up at 3:30. Anybody have final thoughts? Okay, on that note, I appreciate everybody contributing. We'll see everyone next Sunday, 2 o'clock. Renee, you want to say something? Renee, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, okay, sorry.
Okay, Renee.
Yeah, you're talking about, acting at the local level. I really encourage everybody to participate in those 3 national elections that are coming up on the 22nd, the 24th, and the 27th. So we really should pay attention to what's going on at the local level in our community, in our own communities about that. And also November 4th, Detroit Will Breathe is really planning a kind of a Detroit United Front. That's the way they're talking about it. And it should be very exciting for November 4th.
Dave.
Everybody else.
Yeah, on the 24th, I want to remind everybody that Lerna is having a webinar stating our position on the politics of the time. I don't know, was this attached to this, Mike?
No, but we can attach it. We will attach it. We just got that from, we just got that from Bish, the proposed 24th, and the speakers and the readings for it. We will post that to the Weekly Dispatch. Brandon will do that.
Maybe you can send it out to everybody's individual email as well.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Okay. Anybody else got any comments? Final comments? Okay. So for next Sunday, we've got the the impact of the Bernie Sanders campaign, and we'll finish up the discussion on the looming threat of socialism in America. I want to thank everybody for participating, and Renee will definitely look at doing these activities here locally, 22nd, 24, and 27. And appreciate everybody's input.
Sterling,
Thanks very much.
glad to see you back.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay. See you, Sterling. All right.